So welcome to another edition of Conversations with the Experts from 11 Canterbury. Uh, my guest today is Adriano Bello from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Adriano has a very interesting background. He spent a lot of time working with Dell and Intel, introducing them into the Latin American region, and in fact, the whole region of Latin America, not just Brazil. Since that time, he's set up his own company and he's helping other organizations get into the region. He is well versed in the cultural differences. Just today, we were talking about a consulting with a company from Asia Pacific through a branch manager that's coordinating in Mexico, who happens to be from Sweden. So he's got a lot of knowledge about different cultures and different challenges in this area. So I don't know, the kind of first question, I think we wanted to talk about cultural differences. Um, I think it's not only to do with companies, but to do with individuals coping in the environment. I've told you about the example of my daughter-in-law who came from Lebanon after being married, and within 2 months, she was speeding on the highway in Washington State, and a policeman followed her all the way home, 5 miles home, with flashing lights and a siren. And it never occurred to her to stop because no policeman would ever do that in Lebanon. I suspect that dealing with companies where you need a bunch of people to work cooperatively together, it's really important that they understand each other. So is there, am I right about that? And can you come up with kind of a specific example where understanding and the cultural differences made a significant impact to the success of a commercial endeavor?
Yeah, sure, Dan. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's nice being here, having this conversation with you. And yeah, there are several examples where culture has an important role to play in business and in life, as you said, right? At the end of the day, it's all about how people get along together and how they perceive each other. Well, you asked me about an example, and I have an interesting one. Once I was talking with a company that sells telematic solutions for controlling fleets like trucks in the highways. The solution is very good. The solution is for so you have more safety and you have more control of each of the trucks that are transporting the assets of one company, right? And one part of the solution involves a camera, and they installed this camera inside the truck to record the driver. And for the driver, this is very interesting, and it can be very important because it gives you lots of insights about your own safety. If you're a driver and you have this camera inside your truck, you can feel more safe because you have it, and you have more information at the end of the day, so you can do your job better. It's perceived like this in a few countries, but here in Brazil and here in Latin America, because relationships are so important for us and because trust is also so important. In fact, in Latin America, first you need to have the relationship and the trust, and only afterwards you can do business with someone, right? And this solution with the camera in Latin America really had some challenges because the drivers, instead of feeling safer, they were feeling like, oh, there's a lack of trust. They don't trust what I'm doing. So instead of having benefits from using this solution, they were kind of opposing a resistance to the solution. And there were several things that this company that sells the telematic solution, they needed to do several things to overcome this barrier. So this is one of the examples that I have that show how important culture is when you're dealing with different cultures, right? Sometimes you have a solution that works in your home country, has a lot of benefits. You have success in selling it in your home country, but when you go to different countries and you're not aware of the differences in culture, you can have challenges, unexpected challenges that that you have to deal with, right?
Are there general approaches that you kind of take to identify when something is not being understood, or the better way to the better way to figure out what the roadblocks are? Because you're exactly right. If people don't accept it,
Yeah.
it doesn't work, right?
It doesn't work. And you know, this is a challenge because usually the aspects related to culture, they are, let's say, hidden. They are not so tangible. You know, if you're going to a different country, you can go through studies like what the price should be, what the regulations are that I need to follow, what are the target customers. You can have tangible information about all these, but culture is not so clear as this type of information, right? So what I usually do with companies that are coming to Brazil, coming to Latin America, and they are from different uh, continents, what we usually do is first we evaluate what the objectives of these companies, what the objectives are, and how would these objectives work in the cultural dynamics that they are going to face here in the region, right? So depending on the objectives they have, and depending on the way the culture here works, we need to adapt not the product itself, but we need to adapt the marketing and the sales approach. So the clients, the customers, they get to understand better the benefits of the solutions, and the company on its side is more successful on generating sales.
Okay. Are there big differences within Latin America about the way you approach each country, or maybe even within the country itself?
Yes, Latin America is a very big region. We have lots of countries speaking Spanish, and we have Brazil speaking Portuguese. But it doesn't mean that all the countries speaking Spanish, they behave the same. And Brazil, because it is so big, also inside Brazil, we have different regions that have different stories, different migration stories. So the behavior, the attitudes inside the country, they can vary as well. So first conversation that I have with customers when I'm dealing with international companies coming to Brazil and Latin America, first conversation is about, okay, Latin America is not one thing, it's not one size fits all. Latin America has different countries, different behaviors, different cultures, attitudes, and we need to be prepared for all of them if we want to succeed in having our business there.
What about cultures in not only country cultures, cultures of different, you know, company cultures? I mean, I've worked with I worked in a situation with digital equipment and compact computer. Compact computer was formed by uh, a lot of people with military backgrounds. It was a very hierarchical situation.
Mhm.
Digital was in Massachusetts, from sort of the let a thousand blossoms bloom, you know, and there was a real challenge with people understanding how to do things. You know, in the digital culture, your manager telling you to do something was sort of viewed as more optional, whereas in the
Mhm.
compact culture, it was definitely not optional. So, do you have those kinds of things as well? Do you approach them with the same general approach?
Yeah, it happens all the time. It is a very good question because you have the culture of each country, and then you have the organizational culture, which is the culture of the company itself. But if the company is big, it might have a culture in the headquarters and kind of a different culture or adapted culture in the branch. And also you have different people working in the companies, right? So for example, I was in a situation before where we had an Asian company coming to Brazil and Latin America. So they were setting the team in Brazil, hiring lots of Brazilians. These guys in Brazil, they needed to report to someone in Mexico. So the VP of sales, he was in Mexico. And this guy was from Sweden. So you had a Chinese culture, people from Brazil, people from Mexico, people from Sweden. And the culture of each country, they formed the organizational culture. And this organizational culture depended not only on the country itself, but also in the people working. So it's very complex, not complex in terms of that it is hard. It's complex because it has lots of variables flying around, and you need to be aware of all the variables that are playing a role in this kind of context.
I think what you're saying is a lot of success depends on being able to communicate and to listen to what people are, not only what they're saying, but how they're acting, so that you can pick out when there are challenges. So
Yes.
this has been a really interesting conversation. I think there's a lot more we can talk about, perhaps in a future session. I really appreciate your time and look forward to talking again, Adriano. Thank you.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that too. Thank you, Dan.